everybody. We were sleeping in bed, we were standing on the sidelines, so thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much than what it used to be. But together we can heal while we build community.
Okay, so what you hear is not a test. All hands on deck at a time like this. Join TRHT, just an abbreviation for truth, racial healing and transformation. Now imagine having a conversation, practice touchstones and using your I statements. Being fully present when it's your turn to listen. Our community is building and healing through resistant truth talk.
Well, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ed Genesis. I am an organizer, artist. I'm also co-creator of this TRutH Talk series with TRHT, which is Truth, Racial Healing, Transformation, Kalamazoo. And TRutH Talks is it is what it is. It's a real conversation, and it gives us an opportunity to engage with our community and talk about real things in a real way. So today we have misconceptions of Cinco De Mayo, and we have a great panel today. So I would like to introduce the actual speaker for today, which is Eva, and I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Ed.
Okay, thank you so much. And if you would please be so kind as to give a small introduction as to your role in the community, what it is you do, and take it away. Oh, actually, no, before you take it away, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. We have to do the touch tones, and that's just the way that we are grounded with one another. It's like a emotional verbal contract, so to speak, to where we are grounded with one another, to be respectful, to be listening, and to be open for the conversation. So before I turn it over to you, Ava, I want to go through the touch tones just real fast. And that is just being 100% present, extending and presuming welcome, listening deeply, always by invitation. It is never share or die. No fixing. Each of us is here to discover our own truths, to listen to our own inner teacher, and to take our own inner journey. Suspend judgment. Identify assumptions. Speak your truth. Say what is in your heart, trusting that your voice will be heard and your contribution respected. Respect silence. Maintain confidentiality. When things get difficult, turn to wonder. If you find yourself disagreeing with another, becoming judgmental, shutting down in defense, try turning to wonder. I wonder what brought her to this place. I wonder what my reaction teaches me. And we have a new addition, and that is the language of the soul. No language of the soul is more important than any other language of the soul. And with that, I respectfully now turn it over to Ava and step out of the way.
Thank you so much, Ed. For those of you who don't know Ed, he also does a lot of amazing work outside of TRHT. He is also an artist, a poet, a musician, and an amazing community leader here in Kalamazoo. In regards to myself, as Ed mentioned, my name is Eva Alvarez. I am a member of AS, which means Empowering Latina Leaders and Advocates for Success. On my own time, I do a lot of work with the community, especially advocating for immigrant rights. So I'm very excited to be here today with a lot of amazing panelists. And I want to thank every single one of you who are watching and listening to us today on this very special day so that we can learn a lot about our Latinx history, our culture, and generalization and their effects that they have on the Latinx community. And as Ed Genesis said, we will also be learning more about the misconceptions of Cinco de Mayo, what it means, and what we are celebrating today. Again, we have some amazing panelists here today joining us, and I want to give a very special shout out to two individuals who are joining us from outside of the state, from Iowa and the state of California, who you will be hearing in just a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, And I'm going to ask our panelists that once I mention your name and title, to please wave and say hello so that those who are watching and listening to us know who you are. So our first panelist is Angelita Aguilar, the Director of Credential Completion at the Kalamazoo Promise.
Hi.
Thank you, Angelita. We also have Dr. Ron Lopez, who serves as the Chair of the Chicano Studies at Sonoma State University in Northern California.
Hello, everybody.
We also have Dr. Jonathan Montalvo Roman, who serves as the Assistant Professor of Spanish at Graceland University.
Hi, everyone.
We have Nicole Angel, who works as a crisis worker and a community resource advisor with Griffin Place.
Hi, everyone.
Rosario Uribe, who works in external manufacturing for K-Log.
Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, we also have Adrian Vasquez, who is the Executive Director for El Concilio.
Hola.
Thank you, Adrian. Before we get started with the questions, I do just want to say for those of you who are joining us via Zoom, if you do have any questions or comments that you would like addressed, we will be allocating a few minutes to answer those by our panelists. So please include those questions on the chat. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, we will ask you to please put those on the Facebook thread, and we will do our best to answer some of those questions as time permits. So we're going to be kicking it off with our first question, and I'm going to throw this to Dr. Ron Lopez and Dr. Montalvo Roman for them to provide us with the history of Cinco de Mayo and why Americans celebrate it.
Okay, shall I go first?
Go ahead, Dr. Lopez.
Go for it.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you for your warm welcome. Cinco de Mayo, 1862, was the day of a battle in Puebla, Mexico. At the end of the Civil War in Mexico, the War of the Reform, there was the country was in ruins. The economy was in shambles. Spain, Britain, and France all occupied the port of Veracruz, and it became obvious that France, under Louis Napoleon Bonaparte III, intended to stay and establish a French colony in Mexico and to take over Mexico and to overthrow the Republic. This is something that had been actually proposed previously, but this was the first real occupation. The second battle of this war, what sometimes is called the Franco-Mexico War, the French invasion, was the Battle of Puebla. And despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Mexican forces were able to push back the forces of the French Empire. Now, ultimately, that battle, the battle was a very minor battle, and it was one of the early battles of the war. And most of the battles were actually ultimately France was able to occupy for 4 years. But at the end of the Civil War, basically the U.S. started to push France out and create more pressure. Also, the Mexican Republican forces did manage to capture Maximilian of Habsburg and execute him, leading to the victory of the Republican forces in Mexico. But in the United States, and what had become the United States, there was actually already a Mexican population that had been there since the U.S.-Mexico war, or the U.S. invasion of Mexico that seized California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and other parts of what we call the Southwest. And the Mexicans and Californios in California and other parts of the Southwest celebrated because they heard, although it was much later that they heard, that this battle had been won. And so people who were organized into civic organizations called Juntas Patrióticas and other types of organizations started to organize around the idea of we have to support the Mexican Republic, and we're going to celebrate this day as a day in which the Mexican people successfully repelled an invader, as a symbol of our heroism as a nation. And so this became the reason why in the southwestern United States, people of Mexican origin started to celebrate this. And we've been celebrating it since, really since the 1860s. And these organizations continued and became mutualistas and other civic organizations and evolved into other things. But as a consequence, you know, at the same time, Cinco de Mayo was misunderstood, but I believe that's another question. But it's not Mexican Independence Day. And it was a fairly minor battle, but it's a symbol of victory and resistance to oppression.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Dr. Montalvo Roman, do you have anything to add on why Americans celebrate Cinco de Mayo today?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lopez, for that great summary of what Cinco de Mayo really is. I just want to mention that also some people argue that the reason why it is celebrated in the United States is because of the impact that it had in the course of U.S. history as well. During the 19th century, the United States had been taking steps to expand not only west, south, but also in other regions of the continent. And I would like to mention this because I think that will give us a nice overview or the impact of the Battle of Puebla. So the United States, it meant that it started with the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, where it was a policy implemented by President James Monroe to denounce or prevent any European colonization in the Americas. But ironically, the United States was already doing some of that themselves. The United States had an impact in the Caribbean, for example, and like I mentioned, in the West and also South in Mexican territory as well. So it's kind of interesting to see how it was celebrated, or it's so important for American people, but it's because it's attached to that history of colonization as well, which ironically the United States has been a part of still today, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lopez and Dr. Montalvo Roman, for providing us with the history and some of the reasons why Americans celebrate Cinco de Mayo here today. Now that we have a better understanding of the history and why Americans celebrate it, I would like to also know how do Latinx businesses in the U.S. respond to this type of narrative? And I want to ask that to Nicole Angel and to Rosario Uribe.
Yep, so I can go first if you want, Nicole.
Go ahead.
I think it's definitely a business opportunity for a lot of businesses here in the U.S. We see it marketed all over around this time. Different restaurants, the alcohol industry, everyone's really promoting Cinco de Mayo and using it as a business opportunity. And you'll see the different Mexican restaurants, even it's not just American businesses, but the Mexican restaurants, Mexican stores are all promoting, come in, come have a drink, buy one, get one, half off. You see all those types of promotions going on around Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. And I really appreciate all the information that I'm hearing because I grew up in Mexico until a couple years ago. So as I was born here in the States, so I always knew about the Cinco de Mayo festivity here, but I never really took time to ask myself, why do they do that? I just didn't go into it, right? Until these years that I've been here, everyone's like, happy Cinco de Mayo, happy Cinco de Mayo. So why happy Cinco de Mayo? Because everyone thinks it's the Mexican Independence Day, right? So I really appreciate the information and the time that you guys are spending to build this awareness throughout the community. After some research that I did, I found out that this festivity became commercialized. Sorry, my Spanish gets in the way. But it started in the 1980s. And of course, the alcohol industry saw this as a huge opportunity, or the Mexican alcohol industries saw this as a big opportunity to like throw in the their products. And of course, as Rosario said, now tequila and tacos are the best sold thing in Mexican restaurants and bars on Cinco de Mayo, which also, if you ask me, well, yeah, tequila is very important in Mexico, but if you look back to history and how Puebla celebrates, the traditional and real Mexican food used on Cinco de Mayo is the mole poblano, right? So, because that's what we know as a typical dish in Puebla. But yeah, it's a big celebration across the country, and especially in restaurants that have all kinds of names, and there's a lot of Mexican restaurants called Cinco de Mayo as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Rosario and Nicole. I want to follow that up with the main purpose of today, which was understanding some of the misconceptions of Cinco de Mayo. So what are some of the misconceptions about the Latinx community and the effects that they have? For example, appropriation, Latinx narratives. And I want to start with Adrian Vasquez, who is the executive director of El Concilio. If you can give us an insight into some of those misconceptions.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I think with this, I guess as an organization and also as a Mexicano, for me, it's the celebration of Cinco de Mayo is very important. I grew up in Mexico and I moved here when I was 12 years old. So I had, half of my life there now, most of it here. But I think when you come here, a lot of the things, the celebrations that are not from this country is because of the community has, is growing in different areas. So Cinco de Mayo has become bigger and bigger because one, we heard from our colleagues here, because of marketing, because of the, the profits that brings to the to restaurants, to the community. But I think the bad thing is, when they appropriate the celebration, but they forgot to to share the information, because a lot of it is more about, oh yeah, Cinco de Mayo is the Septiembre Independence Day, Mexico, but it's not, it's something else that, yeah, it's important in Mexico, but it's the information that it tells, they tell you when they go into, oh yeah, Cinco de Mayo is this and that, and it's like, no, it's not. So it's about sharing the right information, giving the right information about the celebrations, and still giving credit to the, to the culture, to the people from Mexico. Because I think, for example, us, we celebrate Dia de los Muertos. We celebrated I did celebrate it back in Mexico, but before me doing it as an event here in the community, I got together with different community members and say, well, what can we do to make sure that we're not just, doing this to celebrate and say this is Cinco de los Muertos. No, we wanted to include the community to be part of the celebration. So I think when you bring the community as being part of the celebration, it includes everybody, and it brings the right information. It brings the right people that have to be part of an event that is not just, about making money or, using the name, but more about giving credit to those who really are part of the culture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adrian. Another question that I would like to ask you as well is, given that the Hispanic American Council, El Concilio, is one of the only Hispanic serving organizations here in Kalamazoo County, are there any particular events that the organization does to celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
Any organizations?
Does El Concilio have any particular events that they host here locally to celebrate Cinco de Mayo for the community? Sorry,
not El Concilio. El Concilio used to, back in the days, used to do a celebration to El Cinco de Mayo, but not anymore. Great.
Thank you. I would also want to give Angelita an opportunity to share some of the misconceptions about the Latinx community. And again, for example, appropriations, the Latinx narrative, and anything that you've done and the type of work that you do.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I think one of the biggest, I will speak about my own opinion here. One of my biggest pet peeves is that it is a holiday that has been commercialized and is now lining pockets that are not helping our community. So it's the same people that are profiting from Cinco de Mayo that are also donating to people who are building or purportedly building walls. So I think that that is something to keep in mind. I try to be mindful, and I try to remind the people around me to be mindful of who we're buying from, because I think that that's where it is where green is the Almighty God. And just trying to remind people to not characterize. This is not a caricature. We are not a caricature, as no group is. And so, but I think that so many times, even though there's been a lot of growth in the community in the United States, in not objectifying humans, I think that in the Latino community, that is still occurring way too often. And people are not calling it out as much as other groups have progressed a bit. I'm not going to say it's gone by any means, but just in the advertising, in the objectifying of women, when they're trying to sell beer, of the men wearing the typical hats that, that sort of, I think that that's part that I try to convey in my everyday conversations. And as I've worked with high school students before too, and an educational community, is trying to remind people that, yes, this is a festive time and I have nothing against it. But as Dr. Lopez mentioned, also it promotes and it continues with colonization. This is still to me, it's a colonizing holiday. And so, and it supports the notion that somebody won something, but we didn't really win anything because we're still here and still dealing with, in the United States being able to say that we lost part of our country to the United States and that still we're not welcomed. And so, and especially in these last few years with all the hatred that's been spewed. So I find it a hypocritical moment in our country where we're trying to celebrate something, but ultimately there's no growth in embracing who we are and the history that we have on this continent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Angelita. That's very helpful to know, and I think it's great information for those who are listening to have. In the beginning, we did talk a little bit about why America celebrates Cinco de Mayo, but I would like each of the panelists to describe some of the different ways that the U.S. can celebrate Latinx history here locally with their family or friends.
Yeah, I would like to say something about that. I think Latinx history should be celebrated year-round. We should not only celebrate during the so-called Hispanic Heritage Month or around the Cinco de Mayo holiday. But I feel that Latinx history is U.S. history as well. So we should embrace it and we should celebrate it and educate people about it every day. As an educator, that's what I try to do in the classroom. I try to take down all the stereotypes around what it means to be Latinx in this country. And I also use a lot of the historical perspective in my classes. I mean, to me, history is very important because it teaches us where we come from and where we can be headed. So I try to teach my students, whether they are taking basic language classes or upper level Spanish courses where we read literature or we look at film. So I try to educate them as much as I can and tell them to celebrate Latinx history year-round, not only during those times.
I think Dr. Montalvo was correct. The best thing we can do is educate people, even our family and friends. I know one thing that we do at Kellogg, I'm part of OLA, which is a business employee resource group. And one of our goals, aside from professional development for our Latino employees, is to educate them about the culture, right? And so during these type of holidays, so Cinco de Mayo, instead of celebrating like we used to back in the day, we would have a big celebration. we take the time to educate our employees. And so I remember one year we passed out a flyer that talked about Cinco de Mayo and the misconceptions of it. And a lot of people were truly surprised that it's not Mexico's Independence Day. So a lot of people learned from that. Today we're hosting a happy hour after work, a virtual happy hour, where we're going to be doing a trivia for our employees, where they will hopefully learn what Cinco de Mayo truly is and the misconceptions around it.
I want to kind of grab some from there as well, Dr. Jonathan and Rosario. Educating is the best thing we can do, because as someone, and I think it happens to everyone, but as someone that grew up in Mexico, it hurts to see that a country sees such a beautiful country with so many beautiful things, cultural-wise, identify them or us as tequila and sombreros, because it's very sad to see a Cinco de Mayo or a restaurant in a Cinco de Mayo with people who are drunk and are trying to speak Spanish, have no idea what they're saying. And I really appreciate when people want to learn about my culture, but I appreciate it when they do it in a respectful way, because it does hurt. So I think educating and finding different ways to do it would be the best thing we can do for our community, for our culture in our community.
One thing that that I think is that the 1980s was labeled the decade of the Hispanic by the business community, and that's when they really, they had done this before in communities where there were Mexican populations. I can't speak for places where the population was mostly Puerto Rican or Cuban, but one of the it became called Drinko de Mayo. And of course, you would have these parties and, fraternities, even when I was in college in the 80s, would have like their tequila sunrise parties. And sometimes they would do them on Cinco de Mayo, and sometimes they would just do them whenever. And they would throw like tortillas, like Frisbees at passing students. And they did all sorts of offensive things. And it was very hard to be a college student at that time. And the media really played into this, restaurants, whether they were like a Mexican themed restaurant or just an American themed restaurant, would have their Cinco de Mayo day, Taco Tuesday, or tequila shot special, type of thing, come get your this and you get some tequila shots. And and it's true, it's a problem that we become associated with that and not with, for example, as we know from the story, the effort to establish a democratic republic, a capitalist republic, which was what Juarez was about. He was a liberal that was going to move away from the conservatism and the domination of the church. Now, that is sort of another level of the political story that's very important, because that sort of, if you are going to study, for example, as Dr. Jonathan was saying, if we're studying Latin American literature and we're reading about Cien Años de Soledad by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, that tension between the different factions of the conservatives and the liberals in Latin America, it took place in Mexico, it took place in Colombia and other countries. And we can actually use something like Cinco de Mayo to talk about these broader historical processes, and at the same time to point out that organizations here in the United States, and I know that there were things going on the East Coast too, where the so-called Latin or Spanish population was actually very active. You had people a few years later like Jose Marti, ending up in New York. There's so much to be told. And we have been here, we have been in the Southwest since before, and in Florida, since before Jamestown. So it's like, we've been here. We didn't just get here. We didn't just arrive.
Hi, this is Angelita. I would like to most definitely share sentiments that have been shared. Education. And You know, we need to be like the media and keep repeating the same message over and over again, no matter how tired we get. It does, you know, I mean, sometimes it is exhausting, and I know all of you are very much active in the communities and in each of your community. And I know some days it just seems like we're not moving forward very far. But I'm not, you know, just to be able to continue the conversation, I am trying to make sure that we connect with youth. And I know that Adrian is doing a fantastic job through El Concilio here in Kalamazoo with that. So I think talking to our youth and letting them know, especially our youth from the Latinx community, so that they take pride. And if anyone says anything to them, they can correct them with the right information. I think that that's a huge piece that is, I guess that one thing with everyone being at home now is that there's no bar activity. So no drinko today. But I have seen on Facebook even, you know, like M Live put up like, what are you drinking today? So, I mean, I don't know. So that is just but I think conversations, I think education, I think knowing where our products come from. There's Gustavo Arellano wrote a great book on the history of El Taco. And it just shows how many of our companies are really not owned by our people. You know, it is amazing. So so that's a book that I, you know, read and, you know, shook my head most of it, but it was a good point. So again, I think that in order to slow it down, just being able to just keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add to, I mean, I agree with everybody. I think education is important. And I think also continue raising our voice about giving the right information. I mean, it's important. And yes, Angelita, we are doing, I mean, the work we're doing with our kids, you know, it's not just about giving the support that they need, but also we're going to increase on adding more to now the history where their parents come from. Because I think, yeah, a lot of times, you know, they don't know that information. Our public schools does not teach them about their history, does not teach them about the Aztec, about the Incas, about the Mayas. You know, most of the times that's the important thing they should know, so they can feel. I mean, they're important, but here in the United States, Latinos or born in the U.S. don't feel important because they and still see them as second-class citizens. And I see that because a lot of the kids come to us with, you know, a lot of issues or a lot of things that say, oh, they told me this, they told me that. And I was like, in the bad way. So I was like, that was happening when I moved here, and that's still happening. Like, you know, we need to stop. So we need to increase that support to them and also give you the right information so that when they ask you about Cinco de Mayo or when you hear something about a celebration that is not that was born in the U.S., you can share about them. I think a lot of that information, you know, it's important for them to have, and it's important for us to continue moving forward. And for companies or, you know, people that are they're not from the Latino culture, if they're doing some celebrations, I mean, the way they can give back to the community, like, okay, if you're raising money or you're making money of a celebration that is not yours, at least, you know, help other communities that you know, they're part of the community. Like I know, like we're talking today, I know there's no bars opening, but I think there's an event this afternoon about raising funds for farm workers. That is going to be, you know, held by different artists. So I guess that's a way, you know, to do things to help others. So I think that's important that we should be doing. If we are going to take appropriate from a celebration, we should do it, but also help other communities that really can benefit from the money.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing this information. I do want to take a minute to just ask maybe one or two different panelists to just, there's a lot of people who are listening and watching us at this current moment. Besides attending webinars like these that are very educational and help individuals learn about the misconceptions about Cinco de Mayo, what Cinco de Mayo is, maybe providing some additional resources where individuals can learn more about Cinco de Mayo, either books locally or any resources that may be available for anyone who's watching.
Hi, this is, well, I don't have to say who I am. I'm not on a conference call. I would be happy to maybe collaborate with you guys to do a list of books that we would individually recommend, and then it could get posted. Because there's quite a bit out there, but sometimes it's very hard to get access to. I know that we do have the internet, but it's not always written by the right people. But I would be happy to collaborate after this and be able to share resources of books, documentaries. Dr. Lopez was talking earlier about a movie, and I would like to share that with the community as a follow-up.
I second that. I will be willing to contribute a list of books and resources that I use in my classroom to share with everyone.
Thank you. Dr. Lopez, did you want to add anything? Okay.
Yes, another thing I would recommend is to make sure that your local public libraries have books. If you have, when we can go back into the community, you can do book readings in a cafe. You could even do book readings in a park. In some cases, there's books like Rudy Acuña's Occupied America, or a newer, sort of more formal history, Crucible of Struggle by Zaragoza Vargas. And, you know, that's a sort of general overview history. I also like to use books with lots of essays or articles from the past, so that people can say, like, well, it's like we can talk about Emma Tenayuca, but like, what did she actually say? We can read what she said because she wrote some things down and she was interviewed. And I think that by doing things like that, you know, or even there's books that are really easy to read that might be good for, you know, like teenagers, like by Luis Rodriguez, that are really good resources for people. And then the other thing is community history. I mean, there's things like this, the Chicano movement, and then there's community history. So I think that, for example, by us encouraging people to get their family history, to document the history of the local community, which is sometimes hard because, you know, like the Garcia family and the Mendez family, they don't like each other. So even though they're like intermarried and they're actually cousins, they'll deny it, you know. So, I mean, but we have to tell these stories. I mean, I know I'm actually going to be writing out the story of my ex-wife's grandfather, and we're actually donating her uncle's a rifle he took off a Japanese soldier to the Museum of National History, the one that they're setting up a new one over there for Latinos. So we're going to donate it with the narrative of what happened. And to me, these stories like that, how can we tell the story? People have things in their house. People have short-handled hoes. Los diablitos, remember those? The short-handled hoe. El diablito. If you know someone who has a diablito, I knew people, and you'd say, oh, what's this? And they'd say, don't show me that. Put that away. Don't ever show me that again. You know, I'm going to give you a chingazo. And so it's like, you know, because it was painful for them even to see it. So let's tell the story of El Diablito, or the short-handled hoe, or other things that people have, the things that they won't talk about. How do you do that? Sometimes you can't talk to your Uncle George. Sometimes you've got to get your friend to talk to Uncle George and do an interview. If we can figure out ways of doing that, I'm doing that locally. So if we can figure out ways of doing that, we can tell those stories.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. And for those of you who shared some great resources and for offering to connect with folks to provide additional suggestions for books and ways to continue to educate themselves. We have been getting a couple questions from our viewers, so I do want to go ahead and go with our last question so that we can get an opportunity to answer some of these questions that have been coming in. So the last question that I have for you all is, how do we change the overall narrative as a member of the Latinx community in the US, and what narrative do you want for our community?
I think what I would love to see is for the narrative to change from victimization to proudness, to talking about the fact that, yes, we are the product of colonization. You know, we are who we are, but as a community, to be taken seriously, to have representation, to not shy away from saying who we are and answering questions or asking questions of the community. So I think that I would love, you know, I know that there has been periods of time where there has been a lot more pride out, the Chicano movement, you know, and at some points I know that the community came very much together back in California when 187 was trying really hard to erase us. And so I really feel like this is a time for these conversations, especially with the young people.
I think I'd like to see more celebrating of Latinos in the U.S. As much as we're a growing population here in the U.S., and I think we really need to be talked about more. So I'd like to see more of that versus the tacos and tequila aspect of it.
I would say also, let's not get bogged down in some of the details, like, you know, the Latinx, Mexican-American, Chicano, Hispanic. I mean, I call myself a Chicano. I have issues with the term Latinx, but my personal approach is, if whatever my personal issue is, that's fine. I call myself a Chicano. If you want to call yourself Hispanic or Latinx, that's cool. I'm not going to get into that because we have something to do. We have work. If we sit around and talk about that, we are not going to get anything done. Because at the end of the day, someone's going to get their feelings hurt and their chonies in a bunch, and it's over.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Lopez. I feel that if we take a more a pan-Latino approach, it will be more productive to change the narrative. Like I mentioned at the beginning, some people don't necessarily make the connection between the Battle of Puebla or Cinco de Mayo and other historical processes that, you know, we have faced before. So make the connections, you know, like how this community here, what do we have in common with this other community? And by in common, I don't mean necessarily going through the same historical processes, but how those processes or facing whatever process has impacted you or in your community, I should say. So make connections and change the narrative, not only focusing on one particular group, but taking a more pan-Latinx or pan-Latino approach.
Yeah, I think, I guess I will say something about, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the unity of one community, I mean, not just Mexicanos or Guatemaltecos or Peruanos, everybody should be celebrate together and always, you know, raise our voice when we hear injustice comments or things that are said about our community, because I think the message that's being said right now about the immigrant Latinx community is that, you know, they're all immigrants, they will take stuff, you know, from the United States, but, you know, that's not true. I mean, we have two doctors here. I mean, and I think everybody's a professional one way or another. You know, we're doing things to benefit our community. So as we move forward, we need to move as one, and we need to raise our voice every time. Like I said, we hear misinformation, something is happening to a community that, you know, we know it's not being said about community that is not true. El Concilio, you know, has been growing so much in the cultural area, because I mean, I think for me, I believe that culture and the traditions that we have are some of the foundation of the base that's going to help us move forward, and that our Latinos, our youth that are growing here are going to have, they need that, so that they know that they're part of a bigger thing. They're not just part of a, you know, a small thing here in the United States that are like Cinco de Mayo. No, they're part of a big community back in the home, back in their, you know, their parents' home country. So I think yes, we need to continue moving forward as one community.
I would also say I really hope that we can always remember to support our African American, Asian American, our Arab American brothers, not fight on the basis of religion. You know, but also to celebrate. But then there's other issues that are going to divide us. I mean, one of the big issues here is we recently got a new sheriff who's a Mexican American, and yet 6 years ago, 10 minutes by car from where I live, Andy Lopez was shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy. That sheriff's deputy was found to have acted reasonably, and he was eventually promoted and retired, full retirement. And the death of Andy Lopez was, as I understand, national news, along with Trayvon Martin and others. And he was not doing anything wrong, but he was a brown kid in a tough working class neighborhood that was known for problems, and the cops saw him and shot him dead. So I mean, this is part of the problem that we have to also unify and organize and not be afraid to hold people to account for their abuses. And that also means that, like, if we're going to say, I want to support my friend Frankie's restaurant, but if I find out that he's mistreating his workers, I'm going to have to go say, Frankie, I can't support your restaurant if you're not treating people right. If I hear about this stuff, I want you to. But I also believe that people, because most of us here are old enough that we've made a mistake in our lives. I know I can speak for myself in this, at least. Maybe I'm the only one. But when we make a mistake, we also have to be able to make up for that mistake and do better. And so we also have to give people the opportunity to grow. Say, oh man, you screwed that up. That was bad. Can we fix it? We have to give each other that room, and we have to give our community that room to develop and grow in those ways. Because there's too much pleito, and there's too much conflict, and we tend to get into these things, or we allow people to divide us. As Sir Adrian was just saying, that we don't focus on the business at hand. And it's very easy. I mean, the one like talking about Mexico or Puerto Rico or whatever, people will say things like, "Oh, you're not from here. You're not from here. You speak English so well," or something like that. Or where are you from anyway? I get that sometimes. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Ventura, California. Like, no, but really, where are you from? Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing we have to we have to not play into it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lopez. I want to go ahead and just take the last couple of minutes here to answer a couple questions that the audience has been sending over. So we have a question here from Brianna Asmus. Her question is, given that the narrative is colonizing and commercialism, how can we as a community push back against this narrative?
I would like to add something or pitch into this question. I don't see anything wrong with people, because I see the question, it asks something about Mexican and Mexican American owned business who are having takeout events for Cinco de Mayo today. I don't see anything wrong with people eating tacos and drinking tequila, but the misconception of Cinco de Mayo doesn't just stay as a misconception of Cinco de Mayo. There is a huge misconception of our culture and our country. So I just want to invite everyone to dive in a little bit in our background and understand that we don't come just from celebrations with tequila and tacos, like we said, but we come from a place of hard work, a place of loving people that are willing to do whatever it comes for family and community. So if you're going to go out and celebrate Cinco de Mayo or enjoy a Mexican meal, you can go ahead and do it as long as you are aware where it comes from. So I don't see anything wrong, especially right now with the situation that we're going through. If people are having Cinco de Mayo celebrations, takeout celebrations, that's good, because we know a lot of Mexican people were left without a job because a lot of them were waitresses, waiters, bartenders in Mexican restaurants. there's nothing wrong with it as long as we do it in a respectful and aware way of where it's all coming from. So I'm saying this because I know that a lot of people have a conception of the Hispanic culture that is not reality. So someone mentioned books like The Story of the Taco. If you looked into the story or history of tequila and how it's made and the hard work that it's put behind, I mean, it's beautiful. I grew up in Jalisco. We call it La Cuna del Tequila, where there's tequila, the town tequila. And if you look into it, it's not just an alcohol beverage that you can chug. And we don't even have good tequila here, by the way. But it's something that I would like everyone to dive into our culture. And if you're going to go eat tacos, go eat them. But make sure that you know where everything's coming from.
Thank you, Nicole. I think that is a great segue. I know you covered a little bit, but I want to also get the opinion of others. The other question that we got is that lots of restaurants are doing takeout food events today, and she's wondering how you all feel about both American and Mexican American owned businesses running this type of marketing. For example, for Corona, taco specials, like you mentioned. How do others feel about that? Those promotions today specifically?
I mean, I think, go ahead, Angelita.
Okay, thanks. I'll just do it really quick and then you'll go. I think that knowing where, like, just like Nicole said, where's the business's focus? Are they treating their people well? Are they paying fair wages? Are they, sourcing from ethical places? And I know it takes a little bit of work to do, but I think in the long run, and I'm going to say especially nowadays, who are they contributing to politically? It makes a difference because, again, money is the king and queen and everything. That's where we really need to hit the markets, is making sure that we do support and that the businesses that we're purchasing from are, owned by brown folk, are owned locally, are, and if they're American owned, that's fine as long as they're doing their part, and it's not something that they're doing as a mockery either. I think it's just also the tone. So if it feels like it's an offensive, sale, I would personally shy away from it just because it's, racism isn't funny. And so that's something that we need to, I think, convey.
Thank you, Angelita. I think, just to support both Nicole and Angelita, yes, in these times, I think we need to support all our local restaurants. I think they needed a lot of help. In the past year, the Concilio has been able to, connect a lot with them, from, Los Brothers, La Piñata, all those local restaurants, are owned by local families, and they hire local families too. So a lot of them had to, lay off some of their workers because, they're making profits just to survive right now. They're not making profits to pay all their staff that they had, before this whole health crisis. So we need to, they're doing what they can. And as we know, like I said, we know that they're owned by local families. So we need to support them. It's if big corporations are doing it, I think that's the part I don't like, because they're not, if they're not investing back to the community and they're not helping our local families, why would I go support, big chain restaurant when I can go support a local small restaurant that's trying to survive at this time? So let's support local restaurants.
Great. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Dr. Lopez.
I just, in talking about the commercialization and the things like Taco Tuesdays or whatever, or the tequila, although I don't know, I would disagree. I did buy, last time I was in Kalamazoo, I turned my brother-in-law on to Cazadores Reposado. So not trying to be an alcohol advertiser here, but I do have my favorites. And I think that we need to be advocates within our community and speak out, and also support young people, support people to be successful, give some of our time to contribute to helping people out. And that means participating on boards and in various civic organizations and playing a role. And for those of us who have education and a position, to be present, because it's not enough for us to rest on our laurels. We have to be out there making a difference, or we're part of the problem.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in from Zoom or our Facebook Live channel. I want to thank our panelists again one more time, especially those who joined us from California. Thank you very much. We appreciate all the information that was provided to us. And I hope that those who are watching and listening to us, I hope that this was very useful to you. I hope that we can continue to provide additional resources to help educate you. So thank you very much to our panelists once again. Thank you very much for your time. So in just a minute, I will be introducing DJ Melvi, who will be playing some music for the next hour. But I'm going to go ahead and let our panelists close off. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Gracias.
Gracias
Thank
a
you.
todos.
Thank you.
All right. So as I mentioned, for the next hour, we will be having some music playing from DJ Melvi. DJ Melvi is originally from Guatemala, but moved to Kalamazoo with his family when he was 11 years old. He has been hosting Latin music and hip hop events in Kalamazoo since the early 2000s. When he began his DJing journey, he's been fortunate to have DJed just about every venue in Kalamazoo and others in West Michigan, which I have been a part of, and they have been great music, as well as a few times in Chicago and Miami. Official DJ for local hip hop group Desert Ease. In the past, he has also opened for international artists. Some of those include De La Soul's DJ Maceo, Pete Rock, Talib Kweli, DJ Tony Touch, Slum Village, and Pharoah Monch. So DJ Melvi, the floor is all yours, and we look forward to hearing some great music for the next hour. And it's been a great opportunity to be your moderator for this discussion. Enjoy. I'm going to take off. Thank you very much.